Hey sis, so we're still rolling with the history of women of African descent for week 2 of Black History Month USA. Whenever you get on a flight or a plane and you're greeted by an air hostess or a host, have you ever considered that at one point in time, working for an airline or as an air hostess or a host was only reserved for white folk? Let me tell you about the first ever air hostess of African descent that broke racial barriers 67 years ago today, the 11th of February, when she put on her uniform and stepped onto the plane. On the 11th of February 1958, Ruth Carol Taylor, 27th of December 1931 until the 12th of May 2003, made history as the first woman of African descent flight attendant in the United States. Her journey was not just about achieving a personal milestone. She accomplished this not only for herself, but for us as Black women, by breaking racial barriers in the aviation industry. For Black women around the world, Ruth's history and her story is a testament to perseverance, courage, and the relentless pursuit of equality. Born in 1931 in Boston, Massachusetts, Ruth Carol Taylor was raised during the peak of racial segregation. Despite this, she clearly set out to make something of herself. She pursued a nursing degree at the Bellevue School of Nursing in New York, preparing for a career in a field where Black women were often marginalized at this time. But funny enough, today, when it comes to the caring profession, Black women, especially in Europe, where I'm from, and specifically in the UK, we dominate this field. In the 1950s, the aviation industry was a space dominated by white faces and employees only. Discriminatory hiring practices made it almost impossible for Black folk to gain employment. In 1957, when Mohawk Airlines announced that it was hiring flight attendants, Ruth saw an opportunity. She didn't let her race and the fact that no other Black woman had ever gained access to this type of employment before hold her back. Ruth, therefore, is an example of how Black women have managed to achieve and survive in the face of double oppression by way of race and gender discrimination, all while in 2025, almost 70 years later, we've got men like Umar Johnson sitting on the internet telling Black women, don't expect a finished Black man or for him to achieve much due to white supremacy, which I wrote about and shared with you last week, but I do digress on this point. Despite the deep-seated racism in the industry, Ruth bagged the job, and on the 11th of February 1958, she became the first Black flight attendant in the history of the US. However, her time was short-lived. This was due to sex discrimination based on policies in place at the time. Just 6 months after breaking this barrier, Ruth was forced to resign due to the airline's policy then that forced flight attendants to resign once they got married. This may have impacted men too, but let's face it, it's more likely this was a gender-based practice of the late 1950s to keep women out of the workplace and tied to the kitchen sink. So fighting for civil rights, it appears that her experience fueled a passion for equality activism. Ruth dedicated herself to fighting for civil rights and equality. She became an outspoken advocate against discrimination in employment, pushing for more Black women to enter industries that were close to them due to their race. Later on down the line in her life, Ruth became a writer. Ruth authored the Little Black Book of Black Male Survival in America, and you'll find a link to that in the written version of this article. This was a guide aimed at helping Black men navigate systemic racism and oppression. While this is a good thing, I think it highlights what I wrote about a few weeks ago, that being pro-Black has historically meant for Black women, we should be pro-Black male and place their needs before ours. Where was our handbook? Surely we needed one too. But if we look at history, we can clearly see that somehow we've been out here surviving. If you're interested to hear about what I wrote about a few weeks back for being pro-Black when it comes to women, you will find a link to that in the written version of this essay, or if you search the YouTube playlist, you might find the video of it there somewhere. So back to Ruth. Her commitment to justice while alive was not just about race, she was also an advocate for women's rights and healthcare reform. A legacy that inspires. Ruth passed away in May 2023. She was 91 years old. Today, Ruth's achievement can be seen as an inspiration to many Black women pursuing careers in aviation and other fields where they have been historically underrepresented. The industry has come a long way since 1958, but her story reminds us that progress is built upon the courage of those who dare to challenge societal norms. For millennial Black women, Ruth's journey is a powerful example of resilience. Her story teaches us that representation matters and every barrier broken creates opportunities for future generations. As we remember her work and contributions this Black History Month, and especially today, the 11th of February, which was the day she was actually employed as the first woman of African descent as an air hostess, let us continue to be pro-Black women, knowing that the sky is not the limit, it's only the beginning. Happy Black History Month. Much love, the Black Woman Essayist.